You can't spell often overlooked but indispensable member of an animatronic entertainment band without Bonnie Bunny. You have to move some of the letters around, but trust me, he's there. And that kind of goes for his place in the band as well. Freddy's best man, the guitarist of the group, frequently the first and weakest threat in the games he's in, Bonnie might be considered the most forgettable member of the band, if not for one notable fact. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there. We're going straight down the rabbit hole with this one, folks, and it's going to be a long fall before we hit the bottom. So, let's take in the little trinkets and oddities we spot along the way. Starting from the beginning, Bonnie was introduced alongside his bandmates Freddy, Chica, and Foxy in Five Nights at Freddy's 1. Bonnie was the first of the animatronics to come after you and the easiest of the group, traveling from the stage down the left hall and popping up outside the office. If Bonnie gets inside, he jump scares you, as expected, with the only notable thing being the breathing noise he and Chica make when they make it into the office. Though notable, not exclusive to Bonnie. Another thing that is somewhat notable to Bonnie is a scene that was not in the game but in the trailer for Five Nights at Freddy's, which shows Bonnie removing his face. Again, it didn't make it into the game, but it was neat to look at. And that's pretty much it. Bonnie's reception was okay, but he definitely wasn't the popular one of the group, or the girl of the group, or the leader, or the mysterious one. Bonnie kind of filled that role of that other guy, which is no shade towards Bonnie. This was something that was somewhat remedied in the second game when Bonnie received 2 new forms. Fnaf 2 is a prequel to Fnaf 1, showing a freshly opened pizzeria with a new cast of high-tech animatronics built with facial recognition. One of these new toy animatronics, and again one of the first threats who comes after you, is Toy Bonnie. Toy Bonnie is a clean light blue bunny who fills the role of guitarist just like classic Bonnie did. He's cutesy with big green eyes, reddened cheeks, and a freckled face. Make no mistake, he still very much is a threat. That is, Toy Bonnie is again on the more weaker and more basic scale of threats in the game. Basically, he makes his way through the rooms, through a vent, and into the office, and you have to put on the mask to trick him into leaving. Between this and his design, he's not exactly the scariest thing the game throws at you. Though if there is anything creepy about Toy Bonnie, it's his eyes. For some reason, possibly the facial recognition technology, his oversized doll-like pupils and irises shrink when he gets into the office. It is very strange and uncomfortable looking, and unsettling when you think about it. Though personally, I think the swollen doll eyes are a lot creepier than the shrunken ones. It's the fact that they defy assumed technology to shrink that's notable. But Toy Bonnie wasn't the only Bonnie in Fnaf 2, and he wasn't the one that caught the interest of fans. No, that was the forgotten remains of the old Bonnie, the withered leftovers shoved into the back after having its precious pieces harvested. But like with many of the animatronics and the souls that fueled them, he won't stay down. Withered Bonnie is an extremely damaged form of Bonnie, whose parts were taken for his replacement before he was discarded. The most notable thing being his nearly gutted face. Yet Bonnie still walks amongst the others. He sees with only the faintest dots of light in the back of his skull. Withered Bonnie's mechanics are, ironically, the same as Toy Bonnie's. He's just a lot more aggressive. He crawls through the vents, I don't know how he fits, but he does, and pops up in the office. And you have to put on the mask immediately or it's a rather sudden game over. Due to the state Withered Bonnie was in, gutted and replaced with a pristine copy, he received quite a bit of fan love. Even now, Withered Bonnie seems to be one of the more notably remembered Withered animatronics, which I think might correlate with the fact that he does look so garishly deconstructed, and thus receives significant pity from the audience, and the fact that Toy Bonnie himself wasn't too terribly popular. While Withered Bonnie sort of inched out of the shadows, Toy Bonnie was still squarely stuck in the same shadow Classic Bonnie was. Speaking of shadows, Shadow Bonnie. Now, I won't cover this one for long. In fact, I've already done a full video on Shadow Freddy and Shadow Bonnie, so I'd just be repeating myself. But here's the basics. Shadow Bonnie was an Easter egg for Fnaf 2 who continued to be brought back for later games, with significant lore relevance really only in Fnaf 3. Shadow Bonnie became a very popular character despite this. However, like I said in that video, Shadow Bonnie's resemblance to Toy Bonnie, being a recolor of him, limits his ability to appear in future media. And that pretty much covers FNAF 2. Let's move on to FNAF 3, where we find that the new line of Phantom animatronics does not contain a Bonnie. And Bonnie doesn't have any significant roles in the minigames, except for a glitched out Shadow Bonnie one, where he goes through the other minigames, and the spotting of a new golden colored Bonnie on stage with a matching Freddy. But this is the game where Bonnie's visage is unexpectedly used for new means. Something that, from this point on, will become a reoccurring thing in FNAF. This is when we address the big deal about Bonnie. Bonnie is one of the 4 essential members of Freddy's band, a frequent face with usually a smaller role, but he is also the model chosen for and the visage of the major villain of FNAF, William Afton. In fact, all of his variants and his mini branches, Vanny, the Afton amalgam, all of them are rabbits. All of them derive from Bonnie. This is reflected in FNAF 4 and the Silver Eyes, where it is revealed that the 2 primary Springlock suits worn by the owners and creators of Freddy's, Henry and William, were Freddy and Bonnie. As such, Bonnie and his offspring kind of inadvertently became the faces of evil. Now, that obviously doesn't mean that Bonnie himself is evil, ignoring when he's trying to kill you, but it does show where he stands in these games. And you would think this would make Bonnie a much bigger deal, but it doesn't. And that is because William and his mini rabbit forms are so separated from Bonnie and so attention-seeking in and of themselves that they feel leagues detached, meaning Bonnie is more of a rabbit standing behind them than anything else. An unloved cousin at a hostile family reunion, where 2 patriarchs, neither of which are related to him, keep fighting about which has the better daughter. Then one invites his new girlfriend without telling anyone, and she's young enough to be his daughter, and then I'm getting ahead of myself. The point is that the form of a rabbit has become synonymous with the villainous force in FNAF, but Bonnie really hasn't reaped the benefits from this. Now, I've covered Springtrap and his variations in another video, so I'll rattle them off here, but I won't go too deeply into them. Springtrap, Scraptrap or Afton, Glitchtrap, Burntrap, their FNAF World variations, Spring Bonnie, the gang's all here. Like I said, Vanny 2 also counts as another version of Bonnie, but I'll put her here too since she more groups with Afton than with Bonnie himself. Now then, let's move on to FNAF 4 proper. I've already discussed Spring Bonnie, who is revealed in this game, but that's not the major Bonnie character of FNAF 4. That would be Nightmare Bonnie, the nightmare version of Bonnie. Bonnie is, again, the first threat you encounter. He comes down the hall and tries to make his way into the bedroom. The pattern of the first and the weakest continues again. In the Halloween update, Jack-O-Bonnie was introduced, a Jack-O-Lantern-inspired Nightmare Bonnie redesign. While not too notable here, he will reappear a few times in the future, but we'll get back into him. Also, one of the Bullies wears a Bonnie mask. There's also a spotting of Toy Bonnie as a figure a kid is playing with, which leads to some questions about the time period that I simply don't feel like going into right now. On to FNAF World. Bonnie, Toy Bonnie, Withered Bonnie, Nightmare Bonnie, Jack-O-Bonnie, and the Spring variants all appear as playable characters in this game, with Bonnie and Toy Bonnie being 2 characters you first start out with, making them the first but notably weaker. Those 2 also both have music-based moves, sharing Bash Jam, and Bonnie also having the healing Happy Jam. The other Bonnies tend to have moves more relating to which group they're in, such as Withered Bonnie having Unscrew. Bonnie doesn't have any notable story presence in that game. So now let's get into a big hop for Bonnie. Sister Location really shook up some things, and one of those would be the band dynamic. Circus Baby taking over as the leader of the band, Chica did not appear in the band, and Freddy's right-hand man became his right hand. Indeed, Freddy and Bonnie find themselves paired up again in this duo of Funtime Freddy and Bon Bon. Funtime Freddy being a sadistic animatronic built to kidnap and kill children, and takes a lot of joy out of doing so, and Bon Bon is his hand puppet assisting in his endeavors. It's sort of left vague if Bonnie is an extension of Freddy or his own self. Freddy does talk to Bon Bon like he's a separate sidekick, but there's also suggestions that he might be connected to his AI. I suppose that part's not important. What is important is that Bon Bon can outright detach himself and scamper around the parts and service room when Funtime Freddy is deactivated. Bon Bon is capable of moving independently, making him the faster and weaker one, again. Another notable thing would be that when trying to subdue Funtime Freddy, they have voice recordings of Bon Bon talking him down.
Calm down and go back to sleep. No one is here. Oh, calm down. I think it was just a mouse. Nope, no one is here. Shh, it's bedtime. Let's go back to our stage.
How this works is unclear. Assumedly, Freddy doesn't actually think this is Bon Bon because he's literally stuck to his hand. But maybe the animatronics are simply programmed to at least somewhat follow these cues, and the voice itself is just chosen as being one Freddy might be responsive to. I'm definitely overthinking this. It's assumed that Bon Bon got consumed into the hive mind of Withered, but he returns alongside Funtime Freddy in the sister location custom night update. Though he's shown crawling in the vents in the teasers, Bon Bon continues to work alongside Funtime Freddy. Basically, Funtime Freddy moves back and forth between the halls, and then eventually sends Bon Bon down the hall to rush your office and jump scare you. If he says,
"Hey, Bon Bon, go get him!"
then he's sending Bon Bon down the same hall he's in. If he says,
"Get ready for a surprise!"
then he's sending him down the opposite hall. So basically, you need to listen to the sound cues and keep a general idea of where Funtime Freddy is. Custom Night also introduces Bonnet, a recolor of Bon Bon. Bonnet sashays her way through, and you have to beep her nose to get her to leave. If she reaches the other side of the screen, you're jump scared. Something notable about Bonnet is this line.
Take me with you.
It's kind of strange that Bonnet, while still being aggressive, is portrayed as a little more friendly. At least desiring escape so much that she's willing to put on a sweet voice to request it. So that's the whole run of Sister Location and Funtime Freddy's Bonnie hand puppets. For now, at least. We'll get back to these three later. Pizzeria Simulator, the next game in the series, introduces Rockstar Bonnie as a purchasable animatronic for the pizzeria you're running. He's a middle-tier animatronic, but he breaks the tradition of being the first and weakest animatronic of the night by not even being in the night segment at all. Though Afton, Scraptrap, is. Ultimate Custom Night is where many of the Bonnies come back for round 2. We will go through each one of these, one at a time. Classic Bonnie is part of a double act with Foxy. They both sit behind the same curtain and switch back and forth to who's looking out. You have to peek at Foxy to keep him from jump scaring you, but Bonnie doesn't like to be looked at, and looking at him too long will trigger him to attack. Classic Bonnie doesn't have any new lines. Withered Bonnie's mechanics are pretty much like its FNAF 2 ones, except with less steps and is more forgiving. Withered Bonnie appears in the office, and you have to get the mask on quickly to ward him off. Simple as that. The bonus this time around being that Withered Bonnie has gotten his own voice lines.
Time to face the consequences of your failure. Might as well face the facts. You were always destined to fail.
His broken voice matches his design, as does the multitude of face puns. His personality is hard to read, though his punny jokes come out sounding a bit dry, humorless. Also, there's this line.
What is this new prison? Is it me trapped, or is it you? Perhaps it is us both.
I've considered the idea that the animatronics and souls possessing them might be trapped in this limbo-like space, just like we are, and this is one of those lines, like Mr. Hippo's, that kinda suggests that might be the case. Moving on, Toy Bonnie. Toy Bonnie slides into the office and you put on the mask to scare him off. Simple as that. Toy Bonnie doesn't have any new voice lines. Though, Toy Bonnie does appear as one of Toy Chica's love interests, and victims, and the Chica's high school parody cutscene. Admiring his ears, Chica decides to invite him to her house by lying about it being on fire, then saying she put it out before he got there. Apparently it works, if his leftovers being toted around in her bag afterwards were any indication. Nightmare Bonnie returns with mechanics shared by Nightmare Mangle and Circus Baby. An odd choice of a trio, but okay. Basically, when he appears, you purchase his plush in the gift shop with the coins you've collected around the map. Then he disappears. Nightmare Bonnie also doesn't have any new voice lines. Finally, we have the newest member of the Bunny Burrow, Rockstar Bonnie. Rockstar Bonnie appears in the office, and you have to quickly find his guitar to keep him from jump scaring you. Now, the most notable thing about Rockstar Bonnie is his voice and his sing-song way of giving his lines. I think I recall somewhere that it was said his voice was somewhat inspired by Frank Sinatra, basically a crooner.
I found my guitar, now reach for the stars as I plunge it through your heart. Why so blue? You know I'll be true, and now I'll make slivers out of you.
The main personality take from Rockstar Bonnie being that he likely takes his music seriously, that he is somewhat sadistic if his lines are anything to take from, and that he is easily appeasable by doing him a favor. It's hard to put a pin on Rockstar Bonnie, but that's what we've got. And with that, the Ultimate Custom Night is over, and we're answering the call for Help Wanted. Instead of introducing a new Bonnie, except arguably Glitch Trap, Help Wanted gives us more on classic Bonnie. In the Bonnie repair section, Bonnie's guitar is out of tune, and to fix it we must get into his throat. You must carefully remove the eyes, revealing the uncomfortable red pupils underneath, flip open the face, and then press the button inside Bonnie's gaped mouth while clicking on the guitar buttons to tune it. The most notable thing here being that Bonnie takes on Withered Bonnie's appearance when his face is opened, and that we get a deeper look at the mechanics of both during the segment. It's really neat. Now, Bonnie has a brief section in the Freddy Fazbear theme song, which is currently the closest thing we have to a voice given to classic Bonnie.
Bonnie's my name, I'm hopping along with floppy ears and a cottontail. My guitar is blazing, this rabbit's hair-raising. Just listen to me wail. Take it, Bonnie!
Basically depicting Bonnie as a laid-back guy who likes to play music. That's pretty on brand at this point. As FNAF 1, 2, and 3 are all in the game, all those Bonnie variations appear as well, and Bonnie cameos in a few other levels. Funtime Freddy reappears in the FNAF 4 bedroom section with both Bonbon and Bonnet assisting him as he tries to make it into the bedroom. It's cool to see Bonnet again, but she doesn't get any exclusive lines. Jacko Bonnie also reappears in the Curse of Dreadbear DLC in a Halloween-themed office level. With that wrapped up, on to Fnaf AR Special Delivery. A game which I personally have mixed feelings on, but think has, in some cases, been a big step when it comes to seeing more sides of the animatronics. Such as many of the animatronics getting more voice lines, and, in the case of Ballora, us getting to see her move in a way that was previously mentioned but never actually seen in-game. Bonnie is one of the first and weakest animatronics encountered. Okay, maybe I'm being a little harsh here. In this case, Bonnie isn't the weakest animatronic to encounter. That goes to the Endo. And for the first time ever, I think Freddy, Chica, and Bonnie are all basically on the same power tier. At least none of them are very difficult, and they all have a high encounter rate. Unfortunately, like Chica, and unlike Freddy, Bonnie doesn't have any new voice lines, or any at all. Though he does have a slew of skins. Chocolate Bonnie, Easter Bonnie, Blackheart Bonnie, and Melted Chocolate Bonnie. And Jacko Bonnie, though he's technically not a skin, he's supposed to be his own animatronic, but he kind of looks like a skin. Even just counting the first 4, that's more than Freddy and Chica, which is interesting. If a little confusing, but I digress. Fun fact, but one of the FNAF AR emails implies that Bonnie might have eaten a cat. How and why is unclear. Next one up is Toy Bonnie, who was also released in FNAF AR. Though unlike Bonnie, who was there on launch, Toy Bonnie was brought in later on down the road. Toy Bonnie is more difficult than Bonnie because his gameplay involves the then newly introduced mask mechanics. When Toy Bonnie pops up in Haywires, you have to put on the mask. If his eyes turn red, you must quickly look away with the mask on. Other than that, you just wait for him to charge so you can shock him. Unlike Bonnie, Toy Bonnie has his vocal debut in FNAF AR. See, Toy Freddy and Toy Chica both had their voices revealed in Ultimate Custom Night and then got additional lines here, making Toy Bonnie the odd one out. Toy Bonnie's voice as well is also,
I've been waiting so long for this chance, and now it's finally here. Now I'm a superstar. This is my chance to shine and your chance to fade away. It's not my fault I'm so much more famous than you. My star is rising and yours, sadly, is fizzling out. Don't worry, this next part won't hurt a bit.
So let's get this out there. I think Toy Bonnie's voice might be based off the show The Masked Singer, which blew up in 2019 and had just wrapped up its second season before Toy Bonnie's release a year later. In fact, Season 3 aired between Toy Bonnie's event debut and his introduction as a permanent animatronic. As far as I know, this wasn't confirmed, it's just a hunch I have, what with the pitched voice and all the talking about being a star. Toy Bonnie's personality is pretty bland, admittedly. His lines just talk about how he's a star or how he used to be one. I'm a star. It's my time to shine. Rising up and you're fading out. I'm a superstar. Time to take the stage. Broken up with some basic lines that could have kind of come from anyone. Toy Bonnie got 3 skins: System Error Toy Bonnie, Boulder Toy Bonnie, and Sunken Toy Bonnie. Shadow Bonnie also appears again in the game. He can only be challenged if you collect enough Dark Remnant to spawn him, and you can't collect a suit or CPU. You just get a large loot drop if you defeat him. Freddy in Space 2 is the next game where Bonnie appears. He appears as an unlockable character once you beat the level Cosmic Freeway, one of the most frustrating levels in the game. Not due to difficulty, but due to the warping to island mechanics, which can get you lost frequently. One wrong move and you might have to waste a few minutes getting back to where you once were. And then by the time you get there, you might forget which path you took that led you all the way to the other side of the map. As you can tell, I have some experience with this. Bonnie himself has a decent weapon and jumps high, not as high as Foxy, but does jump pretty well. I sort of feel like by the time you unlock him, if you do the levels in order, you won't really need him. So unless you want to play his character in particular, there's not really a big draw to switch to him. There's 3 Bonnie-themed bosses in the level too. Totem Panic, a Bonnie-shaped tower robot that throws slices of itself at you. Easter Bonnie, a disgruntled Easter Bunny. And Fully Loaded Rabbit, a relatively irritating boss to deal with unless you collect all the upgrades you can in the level. Bonnie's next appearance was in an unlikely place. The Hanna-Barbera cartoon parody teasers for Security Breach, aka Freddy and Friends on Tour. Freddy and his friends Chica and Bonnie are trying to live their best life rocking and rolling across the land, but the dastardly pirate Foxy is hot on their tails. Though, they manage to outsmart him every time. Bonnie is portrayed as the chill one of the group, seldom looking surprised and running with the group before hiding in a potted plant. Then he rocks out with them at the end of the episode. Not too much to say here. It almost feels like there's a significance to Bonnie here, like this might have been a teaser to something, but if that was the case, it was sort of lost to time. Okay, so in all likelihood, this is what you're here for. I've joked about this before, but would you believe that the most attention Bonnie has gotten in years has just been from his absence in Security Breach? That is, the mystery behind the disappearance of Glamrock Bonnie. A new Bonnie variant, Glamrock Bonnie, is heavily hinted in the game with an attraction, messages, and even comments by Freddy, but he is missing and it is unclear where he ended up. So let's go through what we know about Glamrock Bonnie. Glamrock Bonnie was the bassist of the band before his disappearance and Monty took over. He seems to have been a popular animatronic considering the fact that children are still asking about him, leading to Fazbear Entertainment considering rebranding the bowling alley. Though it is unknown how long ago Bonnie went missing. It might have been at least a while since Monty has totally replaced him in the band merchandise and advertisements. It has to have been some amount of time, unless Fazbear Entertainment works really fast. We know that his signature attraction was Bonnie Bowl and can assume that he looked somewhat like the image on the sign, an indigo bunny with pink eyes. There is another sketch drawn of Bonnie by a child. This one might depict Bonnie covered in stars, but that could also just be like an added effect. The eyes weren't uncomfortable until I noticed the pupils. We can assume that likely Bonnie had the body type of Freddy and Monty, and that the Bonnie on the sign is stylized just for the bowling alley. No confirmation, but that's my assumption. If this section seems a little weird, this is because I'm ad-libbing this because I just suddenly remembered this part. There is a cut bowling minigame that wasn't implemented. And with that, there are some screens, victory screens or failure screens for the bowling alley. Like if you roll a split, you get a different screen. Now, what's very interesting to note here is that Bonnie, as portrayed in these screens, is pretty sadistic and aggressive. They show him ripping apart a bowling pin, When you put that in context with that email where Vanny, for some reason, was looking up how long someone will survive if you cut them apart, that and just how much smug aggression Bonnie has destroying these sentient bowling pins. If this was going to be foreshadowing for the fact that Bonnie wasn't going to be a good guy, then well done. It's a shame it didn't make it into the game. Speaking of Monty, there is an amount of evidence that Monty might have been behind what happened to Bonnie. Here's the clues. A message depicting the last known sighting of Bonnie mentions him being spotted going into Gator Golf. He was never seen again. 2. Monty's golf minigame depicts him as taking stage as the lead while Freddy is tossed in the garbage, seemingly depicting Monty's desire to get ahead. Number 3. Monty has a bad temper and has been known to destroy his room, break through fences, etc. It is possible that Monty took out Bonnie so that he could replace him, which he did, which would promote him from side attraction to being part of the main band. Unfortunately, there's just not enough evidence to say this. The other possibility is that Bonnie was taken and deconstructed and used as the endoskeleton that was made into Burntrap. There's no notes or messages to imply this, but Burntrap does have the same sharp-tipped endoskeleton fingers that Monty does. Well, some of them. Assuming that these claws are the claws that the bassists have to pluck the strings, then that might be a connection. But on the other hand, Burntrap might have just been given the sharp-tipped endo design because it was more intimidating. Burntrap went through some major overhauls close to release. Consider that the arm we see in the security breach teaser from February, the one that's clearly Burntrap's arm, is in a completely different location, crawling across the floor. That alone shows that there was something different planned here, so maybe there was a subplot about Glamrock Bonnie being used for Afton. But if that was the case, why give the hints towards Monty? It can't be a red herring if neither or are confirmed or even suggested more than this, right? Whatever. Maybe Burntrap is made of Bonnie. Maybe Burntrap was Bonnie and looked like the Princess Quest amalgam, who looks like the amalgam from the books, but then was changed to be another Springtrap due to time constraints, and so it could be a more familiar face. Who knows? Actually, in hindsight, that would make a lot of sense if those bowling pin screens were trying to imply that Bonnie was evil, because Bonnie was taking out those bowling pins. Wait, was there 9 bowling pins? Here's the thing. There's no real answer here because Bonnie simply does not appear in game and the messages seem to be leading somewhere. But there's no smoking gun. We just don't know where he is. Will he appear in Ruin? I don't think so, admittedly. I'm expecting Ruin to not be that long because it's a DLC, and I don't know how they're going to cover introducing the new character, going about the mystery of Gregory, dealing with these 2 schmucks, and possibly Afton and Bonnie all in the same amount of time, unless Bonnie is the red-eyed schmuck. All we do know is that Freddy and Bonnie were close. Freddy mentions him solemnly early in the game.
There is no rabbit at the Mega Pizzaplex. Not anymore.
Then later, there is a secret if you bring Freddy up to Bonnie Bowl late in the game and walk him up to the stage where he says this.
I do not come up here anymore. I miss him.
I gotta be frank here, but I think this line is pretty much the best thing in Security Breach. And I don't mean that as a negative or throwing shade way. This line is perfect. The delivery, the tone, the brevity, it gets across so much in one instant, both about Freddy and his relationship with Bonnie. It's funny how you can go through long explanations about a character or their history, or all these intersecting plot lines, and pull apart what they might mean looking for an answer, and then just have one really well choreographed line give just as much information in a split second. Except it just hits differently. Okay, enough of that. Moving on to the present. A new line of circus-themed merch has been released, and Clown Bonnie and BB Bonnie have both been introduced. I really like Clown Bonnie. Something about the stripes and bells on the ears give me security puppet vibes. Will Bonnie return in an upcoming game? I think that's pretty much a safe bet. No speculation there. I don't know when or to what degree, but I expect the impending return any day now. Now, onto the books. In The Silver Eyes, Bonnie is the weakest of the animatronics. Okay, no, I'm kidding, but it wouldn't be much of a stretch to say that Bonnie is easily the most overlooked of the animatronics. In the Silver Eyes, Bonnie is the only animatronic who doesn't really get a moment. Like, Freddy's the titular character, Charlie has that chase scene with Foxy, and there's an escape scene with Chica. I can't really remember anything Bonnie did that really stood out. The same goes in the Twisted Ones, where he's one of the homogenous mixture that is Freddy's band. That is, before they become a literal homogenous mixture in the fourth closet. Twisted Bonnie is probably the least notable of the Twisted Ones. I can't even remember if Bon Bon was in the fourth closet. I'm assuming he was, but for some reason I don't think so. So, this was pretty much a bust, right? Admittedly, this whole section is getting pretty dull. I should do something to spice it up. Have you ever heard of the name Cassidy? In case you don't know who Cassidy is the big buzzword name character that gets teased all the time and is the center of most theories and speculation. And yet, who we know zilch about concrete-wise. In fact, the only piece of media that talks about Cassidy to any degree is the Silver Eyes trilogy, where it talks about her being Bonnie. Now, the current theory is that Cassidy and the Crying Child are both Golden Freddy. Something Fnaf AR retcons Bite of 87, I thought the toy animatronics were new, yada yada anyway. So Cassidy is kind of a big deal when it comes to FNAF discourse. So the idea that she's not Golden Freddy but instead Bonnie, well, I know people kind of just don't really go for it. And I know the Silver Eye switches the names of some of the kids. Well, switched. The books came out long before Pizzeria Simulator, so who's to say what switched what? The discourse on the books is very strange. Some of them are deemed canonically important, some aren't. Some characters are considered important if they're seen as stand-ins for other characters. That's not my point. The point is, for a hot second, Bonnie, one of the most forgotten of the stepchildren, was possessed by the name that gets the most clicks. And then it was over. Okay, on to Fazbear Frights. So there's not many Bonnie appearances, but there's 2 Bonnie-adjacent stories. Like Bonnie-ish villain stories. Starting with Bunny Call and the character Ralpho. Ralpho is a guy in a bunny suit. Don't let the cover showing a toy bunny fool you. That was a mistake, if the anecdote I heard was correct. Basically, a family visits camp. The father, who doesn't want to be there, signs up for something called the Bunny Call, a call service to rouse everybody early. Though he regrets the decision and has to Five Nights at Freddy's the Rabbit out from coming into the cabin until 6 a.m. In the morning, Ralpho leaves and he rejoices with his family. They find out later, to his shock, that there weren't any bunny calls because the counselor overslept. So, who is Rabbit? But don't let my nonchalance fool you. While the idea of Ralpho himself seems a little apt and knockoff to me, the story itself is actually one of Fazbear Frights' better ones. It doesn't feel overly cruel or insanely unbelievable. It ties into FNAF with its mechanics, especially if you consider the main character, a father of 3, as a parallel to William and basically being the one who didn't give in to the rabbit and learn to appreciate his family. I'm putting too much thought into this, but my point is, it's an okay story. The other one, Sea Bonnies, is not. In fact, I would say Sea Bonnies is pretty lousy. So a kid gets sea bonnies, little sea bunny creatures that he raises in a tank, and to get to the end of a long story fast, after they bully him for a while, he throws them out, then accidentally swallows some, and then turns into a goo monster. You know, the usual. It's basically just a Goosebump story about sea monkeys, but they changed it to sea bonnies and called it a day. That, and to end on an unfortunately sour note, that's pretty much it. You know, Scott always said that he thought Bonnie was the scariest animatronic. Or, well, he said Bonnie gave him nightmares, or something like that. He said something about Bonnie being scary, and I can see that. And I think that's why the main villain became a Bonnie. It's rather unfortunate that because of that, Bonnie kind of gets perpetually sidelined. I mean, they can't all get a starring role, but Bonnie's always been the bridesmaid and never the bride. The closest he got was the mystery and security breach, but as it was unfinished, he kinda lost the chance to that too. And it's unfortunate because I think Bonnie's an excellent character. Even without the connection to the main villain, he is a really cool dude, and I hope someday he gets a real moment to shine. I know he'll be back, he just needs a chance to do something a little more significant, a little more bold. Anywho, time to climb back out of the rabbit hole and find something else to crawl into. probably bed. Thank you for watching.